In Malaysia, the issue of LGBTQ plus rights is this huge, complicated mix of law, religion, and politics. It's a topic that really divides the nation, and it impacts everything from the highest courts all the way down to a person's everyday life. Okay, let's get into it.
To really get what's going on, we're going to peel this back layer by layer. First, we'll dive into the laws themselves. Then we'll look at what the public actually thinks. After that, we'll see how this all plays out in the political world. And finally, we'll talk about the real human impact of it all. All right, so to really understand the situation, you first have to find your way through this incredibly confusing and sometimes contradictory legal landscape. Believe me, it is not as simple as just one set of rules. Yeah, that's the big question, right? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. That's because it's not just one legal system at play. You've actually got two completely separate systems running side by side, and that creates a pretty complex web for people to navigate. Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. Malaysia has what's called a dual legal system. So on one hand, you've got the federal criminal law. This is a leftover from the British colonial days, and it applies to every single citizen. But on the other hand, you have state Sharia laws. These are Islamic laws, and they're passed by individual states, and they only apply to Muslims. The most well-known or maybe infamous part of the federal law is Section 377A. Now, the wording is really broad. It makes it illegal to have, and I'm quoting here, carnal intercourse against the order of nature. This is widely interpreted to include things like sodomy, and the penalties are incredibly severe. We're talking up to 20 years in prison and even caning. And if you're a Muslim citizen in Malaysia, there's a whole other layer to worry about. It's not just the federal law. Each state has its own set of Sharia laws, and this means the rules can be totally different depending on where you are, criminalizing everything from same-sex relationships all the way to cross-dressing. You know, if breaking down this complex legal maze is giving you a clearer picture, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It's a super simple way to make sure you always stay ahead on Malaysia's biggest issues, and honestly, it helps us a ton. So those are the laws written down on paper. But what do Malaysians actually think about all this? Well, when you start looking at the public opinion data, you find a country that's really divided. And sometimes people's views seem to contradict each other. Let's kick this off with a number that honestly might surprise you. A survey from a few years back found that just over half of Malaysians, almost 53%, actually believe the government should be protecting transgender people from discrimination. But here's the thing. That support has its limits. When you dig a little deeper, you see that strong majorities of people are against more specific rights. For example, over 60% disagree with same-sex marriage, and nearly 57% disagree with gender-affirming surgery. There's also a lot of opposition to letting trans people use the restroom of their choice. So what's behind this split in opinion? Well, a report from the University of Malaya gives us a big clue. It found that for a huge majority of people who don't accept the trans community, we're talking 77%, the core reasons come right back to their understanding of the country's laws and religion. Now, this deep social division, it becomes like rocket fuel for politics. For decades, the issue of LGBTQ plus rights has been this really powerful tool that leaders use to define who they are, to rally their supporters, and to draw clear lines in the sand. And there is no single event that shows this better than the case of the former Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. His trials, which were all centered on these charges of sodomy, basically took what was once a very private topic and just exploded it into the center of public and political life like never before. I mean, this whole saga was a true roller coaster that went on for 2 decades. It starts with him being dramatically fired in 1998, then convicted. Years later, the federal court clears him, only for him to get arrested again on new accusations and convicted again in 2015. It wasn't until 2018 that he finally got a full royal pardon. This constant back and forth just kept the issue burning in the national headlines for years. And throughout all of this and beyond, the country's top political leaders have really stayed on the same page with a pretty hardline stance. You had Prime Ministers Mahathir Mohamad and Najib Razak both publicly framing LGBTQ plus rights as this foreign threat, basically calling them Western values that just don't fit in Malaysia. And look, this isn't just history. These tensions are still boiling over in today's headlines. Just in the last couple of years, you had authorities seizing rainbow-colored watches from Swatch stores, then a massive international music festival getting shut down after the band the 1975 had an on-stage protest, And then, plot twist, a court turns around and rules the watch seizure was illegal to begin with. The cycle just keeps going. Okay, so we've looked at the laws, we've looked at the public opinion polls and the politics, but what does all this actually mean for LGBTQ plus people living in Malaysia every single day? What's the real human impact here? Well, international groups like Human Rights Watch use a specific word to describe it: pervasive. And that doesn't just mean discrimination happens sometimes. Pervasive means it affects every aspect of your life, from the constant risk of being arrested or assaulted to being denied a job or even basic health care, just because of who you are. And this reality, it shows up in the global rankings. In 2023, a global index on trans rights ranked Malaysia as the second worst country in the entire world for transgender people. Let that sink in for a second. Second worst in the world. And you can really hear the pain this causes when you listen to people who work directly with the community. An outreach worker named Manis, she was talking about the maknya, or transgender women, and she put it so simply. She said they have lost all their basic rights as a human being simply because they are different. She explained that many are forced into sex work because finding a regular job is just almost impossible.
And on top of all that, the state itself actively promotes conversion therapy. The government's own Department of Islamic Development, known as JACAM, runs these official programs to, in their words, rehabilitate LGBTQ plus people. And they claim that over than 1,700 individuals have gone through these programs just since 2011.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to keep making sense of these big, complex issues together, the best way to do that is to join our community. Just tap that like button and hit subscribe, and let's make sure you're always one step ahead of the conversation. So where does all of this leave us? It leaves us with a really critical question for Malaysia's future. You have a nation that's caught between tradition and modernity, between overlapping laws and very deeply held beliefs. So where do you find the balance between cultural values and individual human rights? The answer to that is going to shape the country for years to come.